quite a year for Julia Glidden. She heads up the public sector for Microsoft worldwide, and we've invited her here to talk after last year's conversation about the role of AI in sustainable innovation, about working from home, and more about the public-private collaboration and agility that organizations are trying to bring to the public service. Please welcome back to the Forward 50 stage for 2021, Dr. Julia Glidden. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Alistair. It's wonderful to be here again. My favorite event of the year.
See you. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm very close by to you all. I'm on the Maine-New Hampshire border in the Northwoods.
Wow. You chose a great place to wait out the pandemic, that's for sure.
I sure do.
How has the last year been? It's been kind of a whirlwind since we last spoke.
You know, even as you said, it's been quite a year. I took a big, deep breath and said, wow. What a year. I mean, do you remember when we talked, we thought we were coming out of the pandemic and we were talking about the new normal. And now I don't even think we even know what normal is. We have such a merged reality to our talk today about tech and AI and agility. So it's been a hard year. I won't lie. It's been a really long, hard year for our teams, hard year for our clients, hard year for the world, really. But as you said, you know, necessity and hardship can be the mother of invention. Then we've had some really good things come out of it.
So I recently talked to Vic Pant and your John Weigelt about the three initiatives that you've been running related to AI and government. Their work really focuses on environmental things that AI can help with. And there were some unusual examples, predicting traffic patterns, because obviously that leads to waste of fossil fuels, mine safety, or even detecting fraudulent energy claims in things like the Energy Star program. And what struck me is, and this is front and center in Scotland this week, there's this balance between austerity, you know, radically reducing consumption, carbon offsets for everything, don't fly in an airplane when you can do a video conference, and then innovation. There's concrete that eats CO2, or red algae that reduces cow farts. I mean, who knew that? Or cow burps. Who knew that was a useful thing? Can you talk a little bit about how technology is balancing sort of austerity and innovation in government? Is it more, do you see it more about increased efficiency and therefore less of an impact? Or do you see it about research and development of new innovations that will solve the problems in a more active way?
I don't think it'll surprise you, you know, given what I've dedicated my life to, which is technology, public sector, and social good. I'm a big believer in the power of innovation. I truly believe that what we really need to be doubling down on is the way technology can reduce carbon emissions. You know, at Microsoft, we're committed to reducing our carbon emissions by 2030, you know, to net zero. That's huge. That's powerful. If we look at Gandia, a city in Spain, they took out 3 tons of carbon emissions by using data and AI and cloud in new and innovative ways. So, you know, when I look at carrots and sticks, I know there's a balance, as you say, but I would say to folks, don't give up on innovation. Don't give up on the power of us all to lean into human nature, because when push comes to shove, we do get on that plane and we do head south when it's getting, you know, it's getting cold. I heard it snowed north of Toronto today. You know, at some point we do use the modern tools and technologies and conveniences that we've gotten used to. And I think that what we really can do is, as a technology partnership with the public sector, is look at ways in which innovation can unleash savings, can unleash efficiencies. And I would say from a public sector perspective, really important to look at the role the public sector can play in doing that, because of course it's a unique role, because the public sector creates the compliance environment, the regulatory and legal environment. It's then the enforcer, right? So it's the policymaker, it's the enforcer. And then when we're working together on really cool data and AI projects and innovations and pilots, it's also the complier. So that's a unique position. And I think that together, and I loved the focus that Stefan and Angela had on public-private partnerships in the real sense of partnership together. I think if we look at that word as policymaker, complier, enforcer from the government's perspective, and genuine partnership from the innovation perspective, the sky is really the limit in terms of what we can unleash to get that balance, a little more carrot and a little less stick.
Yeah, it does seem one of my favorite historical examples, although it's often been cited as a reason to do nothing, which doesn't make sense, is it's called the Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894, when the leaders of the world got together because the horse poop was piling up in cities. And if you look at the numbers, it was like 3 horse carcasses in the streets a day. 65 horse carcasses in the street a day. I did the math on the number of pounds of manure that showed up, and the Times of London said there will be 50 feet of manure in the cities of the world if we don't do something. And the mayors of the world got together in 1896 for a meeting and said, "Oh, we got to fix this problem." They left with no idea what to do. By 1912, cars were everywhere, and the problem was forgotten. Now, cars begat another problem, obviously, with pollution that had an externality we didn't see. At least we could see the pollution from horses. We were doing something about it, so we may be better off if we got to see car pollution. But it does sort of paint a picture of having a balance of the two and not knowing what's coming down the pipe. But it feels like working from home has really shown us something that's possible. A lot of people are reconsidering where they live, moving out of urban environments. Last year, Paul Glover told us that the government rolled out Microsoft Teams in 6 weeks, something that was projected to take 3 years.
I said 3 years, yeah.
And so presumably you have analytical data as Microsoft, given the widespread adoption of Teams and Office and all the other platforms you have, and as well as LinkedIn. And Audrey Lubopoulou is going to be sharing some work insights from LinkedIn now that she works there later on in the week. What have you been learning about how people work from home and how you think that's going to change things?
I think the work from home genie is not going back into the bottle. And I have to tell you, I don't know if you know this about me, I'm a historian, cultural historian by training. So you really got me with the cow poop analogy. That was a new one for me, but it's beautiful. And if you don't mind, Alistair, I'm going to steal it because it is
Google Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894. It's a hilarious read.
But it's a powerful example of we can't see tomorrow today. If you asked me 2 years ago that I would be running assuming a role running a global technology public sector business from home on the New Hampshire-Canadian border, my happy place, and literally be able to do it without ever getting on another plane, it was inconceivable to me. This is the first time in 20 years that I've lived in the same time zone for more than a year. Just think about that carbon emission and that savings alone. I grew up in cities. I used to take tubes and I used to take taxis and I used to buy coffees and I used to, consume all kinds of energy and spend all kinds of money every day. And now I go for a walk in the woods. So, we don't know what's around the corner. We know the problem as you so, aptly said. And we know how to work together to address it. So the genie in terms of remote working, it's not going back into the bottle. The statistics are out. Even where cities and countries are opening up, you're looking at a 3-day home, 2-day back to work, which is massively changing the footprint of urban living. I mean, think about the pedestrianization we're able to see, the green farming, urban farming that we're able to see, outdoor dining, just literally changing the footprint of what used to be some of the most horrendously clogged urban centers everywhere. So, as we do this, of course, there's a human side. And I'll let you in on a little, green room moment. My dogs, I live on 22 acres in the middle of nowhere. But my dogs, saw an animal outside and started screaming. And I thought, a little bit of panic. And then I said, well, I'll just tell the audience I'm working from home. And I actually think, well, I miss people. I can't believe I'm not with you all in person. I thought so much last year I was. What I think has also been really interesting about work from home is it's humanized us. I'm here in my kitchen this year. I'm not even pretending to be in an office, right? I'm bringing you into my home. My dog is sitting by my feet. I feel like I know you through this 2 years of virtual. And I do think that is enabling us to have different ways of connecting, different ways of communicating. I'm not saying they're better, but they're different and they do reduce the carbon footprint. And in the hour of need, we were able to do this radical change that had these unintended positive consequences.
I love it. I think it should be acknowledged when you say, wow, green farming and outdoor dining, it's a very privileged point of view. There are millions, billions of humans for whom green farming and outdoor dining is just life. So I think what we're seeing in some ways is obviously the privileges that you and I have also mean we have a much greater carbon footprint as a result. And in some ways, it's returning to what is the default for billions of humans. So there's a bit of myopia here that the people who have to change their carbon footprint the most are those that have benefited from the externality of carbon as much as they have. Have you seen patterns of changes in procurement or deployment or testing over the last year as stuff is rolling out? Because obviously the adoption of Teams has been incredibly widespread and accelerated by the pandemic, but also many of your features, we're using your transcription and translation tools to do all the captioning in French and English across all 5 channels here in real time. What have you seen that's changing in the pandemic about the deployment, the rollout, and the testing of technology platforms?
Well, you know, in the darkest hour of need, the public sector had to keep the lights on. You know, first responders had to stay connected. Learners needed to keep learning. Hospitals needed to keep functioning. Tubes, you know, transport needed to be maintained. And suddenly, all those, no, we can't, you don't understand, it's different in the public sector, went out the window. You said, you know, hardship is the mother of necessity, or don't let a good crisis go to waste. And I think, you know, Satya, I'd shared with you last year, said he saw 20 years of innovation, 2 years of innovation in 2 months. And I said, no, it's 20 years in public sector, because we suddenly in the hour of need saw what we can do together. Now, together, through trusted environment, it's taxpayers' money, a trusted relationship, and with very targeted needs. And the needs were not about getting Teams numbers up or getting, you know, 1 million learners. I think we got 1 million learners in a week on Teams overnight. That wasn't about money. We were all human beings in this crisis together, leveraging the technology and innovation tools that we had to really drive more agile ways of working together. And, you know, I was concerned last year when I spoke with you that perhaps as the pandemic phased out, we would go back to the old, more rigid ways of working. That's happened a little bit. That's human nature. That's understandable. But that innovation genie is out of the bottle, just as the remote working genie is out of the bottle. And I think that there has been a much deeper sense of the true meaning of public-private partnership, as Stefan and Angela were talking about, and what can really be done within the confines of trusted procurement, of stewardship of taxpayer dollars, of transparent procurement, of fair and ethical procurement, because that's so important. We don't throw that out because we want to innovate. But I think we've really pushed the boundaries of what we can do in a more agile and nimble way. We've reaped the benefits. And I think we're now at that phase where we're embedding those lessons learned into a post-status quo world where we will never be quite as risk averse and slow as we were before.
I had a chat with Angela early on, and we just saw her talking with Stefan about this morning. Everybody says, oh yeah, it'll be easy because the public sector will focus on things that are strategic that only it can do, and private will focus on things that are sort of non-strategic, the platforms, the plumbing, that kind of stuff. But someone's got to decide. And 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, websites might have seemed strategic. And today you go on Wix or Squarespace or whatever, right? That, first of all, the boundary is shifting. And so I'm going to be a little difficult here. Something that seems like it's not strategic today might become strategic in the future. And once we've made that decision, it's hard to go back. So, you know, Catherine Luello talked about things like open by default, or analytics by default, digital identity by default, sort of designed into things from the beginning. Who do you think should make the decision about what's strategic and what's utility?
You're going hard on me this year. It's a great question, and the answer is there is no real. I mean, I can tell you, of course, the public sector should make those decisions. We elect our representative officials; they're stewards of our health and our safety and our social. And the private sector is only about making money. But that would be such a simplistic and reductive way of looking at things, because the reality is, the world is too complex. These silos that we're very comfortable with, this kind of very deterministic way of looking at different roles and responsibilities, really don't exist in this technology-fueled 21st century world we're living in. So what does that really mean? That means we can't trust the public sector to make the really difficult decisions for us as citizens, and I'm speaking as a citizen. Technology companies, private sector cannot just assume the public sector will do it. I think we all have to think of ourselves, you know, the topic of sustainability. We're all human beings, and we learned this during COVID. we might want our roles. I'm the private sector, you're the public sector, but we are all human beings. And we all need to make these decisions together because we are at an inflection point historically in terms of the relationship between society, technology, human beings, technology. And if we don't all lean in as human beings with our shared interest in an ethical, humane, sustainable planet Earth, in which all of our rights and our dignities are respected and embedded in how technology is used, we will be all stumbling into a dystopia. And I don't want to be negative about it because I am actually an optimist, but I think it has to be a very conscious decision that we are all in this together. And each of us at every point in our day makes an ethical decision about how am I going to talk about AI? Am I going to talk about it as a panacea that's going to answer all of the problems? There's a million things I can tell you AI does that is amazing. But it can be very dangerously deployed. It can have biases built in. If we don't work together, Microsoft and the Canadian public sector and public sector agencies around the world, to ensure that bias is not built into our AI algorithms, we're stumbling into a dark world. We can't just assume that someone else is going to do it. I think we all have to, I would say ethics by default.
Yeah.
We need to be building ethics.
It's interesting that tech has absolutely become ethics, as you say. And I think a great example of that, which surprised me, was when Canada rolled out its benefits. We used the banking system as authentication because Canadians had bank accounts and you could with one click log into TD or CIBC or whoever your bank was, and we were authenticated. And that was a pretty good solution that avoided having to roll out, ubiquitous digital identity, and it got done in 3 weeks. And it was a perfect example of like all hands on deck. What can we use to solve this problem? Another thing I think that comes up a lot in conversations with public servants over the last few years, when I first started talking to people in 2017 for Forward 50, government departments in Canada couldn't send a calendar invite on Outlook to other departments. And it seems like the private sector has a role in helping government collaborate across divisions, jurisdictions, and even geographies, because there's an inherent cross-pollination. Hey, we've built this solution. Here's a case study from the UK. Oh, wait, you can do that? Show me how it might work in Canada and vice versa. Do you see the private sector as being a kind of connective tissue for innovation?
Oh, I mean, my whole life has been dedicated to working with public sector innovators around the world and sharing and exchanging best practice. And one of the great things about working in the public sector, if I do say so, to my commercial enterprise colleagues is, our clients want to share their innovation. They want to share what they've done, how they've unlocked more agile procurement, how they've used a functionality like Teams to break down silos, to get over those historic Weberian bureaucratic, cages that used to lock us all in. And so, we're very, very privileged, those of us that work in technology and the public sector innovation space, to be able to see the way in which, as you said, 10 years ago, a website was innovative, citizen-centric website. Goodness forbid, we needed green books to figure out how to access whatever esoteric department it was that we might get authenticated to get the vital service. I mean, that was in our lifetime and in our, near memory. And where we are now is through partnership and through these collaborative tools, and moving away from the old days when public-private partnership was, $10,000 or 10,000 euros to change an HTML website. I remember those days. Okay.
Oh, I remember Front Page. I'm that old.
Yeah. So, but we're now in a situation where, again, the limitations are about issues like data protection and privacy, in terms of how we share information, in terms of how we access, in terms of how we collaborate. But there was a time which my friend Andrew Stott from the UK called it data huggers. We can't share an Outlook because our data might, and we've moved beyond that to really understanding, all of us, about data protection and privacy and the reasons we need to be cautious, and the precautions we need to embed into how we collaborate across silos. We've moved beyond that through COVID. Another, upside to really thinking about collaborative by default, connected by default, where the answer has to be why not, right? And I think that, if I leave folks with a way to think about the innovation, is when you find yourself falling back into that pre-COVID, we can't, you have to ask yourself, why not? And if the answer isn't bigger than the benefit, that's a good time to pause, reflect, and think about how we can do something different.
That's a great note. I think I wish to end this is just keep asking why not, because that really is the underlying question that I think COVID has made us all realize, is that we can't actually do stuff when we decide to, as opposed to deciding not to. So thank you so much for joining us, Julia. It's always great to see your face. Hopefully we get to do it in person sometime soon. A special thanks, obviously, to you and the whole Microsoft team for putting this on and for helping us get the word out about the Regional Access Program. I have to say your team got invites out to hundreds of people in well over 50 regions around the world. I think we got up to 70 or 80 regions that are joining us. Like I said, Rwanda, Mongolia, it's fantastic to see that. And supporting the whole community year round and supporting this conference from the get-go. We really couldn't do it without you.
Awesome. And next year, I will see you in person, Alistair. How's that?
Great.